So for my prominent artifact, I selected the Gedi scroll. In 1970, professors Dan Barag and Ehud Nezer from Hebrew University and Dr. Sefi Portath from the Israel Antiques Authority discovered a charred scroll in the Holy Ark of a synagogue in Engedi that was destroyed around the 6th century CE. The scroll, when they discovered it, was so damaged that they could hardly handle the remains of it without it crumbling and disintegrating. This is a map of Engedi. Engedi is an ancient site. The oldest structure at the site is this Chalcolithic temple you see here right near the center that dates to about 3500 BCE. The site went through various cycles of destruction and occupation, but eventually by the 2nd century CE, it became a flourishing Jewish community, complete with a large Byzantine-style synagogue. You can see here where the synagogue is marked on the map with the Star of David. In the 6th century, the synagogue and the surrounding homes around it were destroyed by a fire. These are some pictures from the archaeological site today. On the right-hand side, you can see this beautiful mosaic. One of the things the site is well known for is these large Byzantine mosaics that are quite well preserved at the site. This is a picture of the scroll that they discovered. Since the scroll was discovered in the Ark of a synagogue, it was believed that it was a section of Torah, but due to the state of the scroll and its condition, it was impossible to really know anything for certain about it. So they placed the scroll in storage for about 40 years to preserve it and protect it in hopes that one day the technology would develop that would allow researchers to study it further. And that breakthrough happened in 2015. A small team of computer science researchers from the University of Kentucky developed a program that allowed them to scan and virtually unwrap the scroll. The scans revealed 35 lines of texts from the 5 wraps of the scroll. Each line had about 33 to 34 words in it. 18 of those lines were well preserved, and the remaining 17 were able to be reconstructed. After they reconstructed the lines, they determined that this scroll contained an opening portion of Leviticus. You can see here some of the scans of the scroll. On the left-hand side, there's a cross-section. You can see the various wraps in it. And on the right-hand side, you can see how they were able to isolate each individual wrap and see what that looks like there in the programming. And you can see some of the text as well. The text is a bit more clear in this image. This was after they digitally unwrapped the scroll, and then they went through and began to reconstruct and translate the lines of the text. You can see here, this is what it looked like before, and then this is what it looked like after it was unrolled. When they unrolled it and started translating the scroll, they found that the scroll had a non-vocalized Hebrew script that was quite similar to the Dead Sea Scrolls. The two sets date to about the same time, the Dead Sea Scrolls from about the 3rd century CE, and this scroll from about the same 2nd or 3rd century CE. The words of the text, however, were a little different, but they're an exact match to the Masoretic text, which dates to the 11th century CE. So this means this scroll is the first and currently the only bridge that we have between the Dead Sea Scrolls of the 3rd century and the Masoretic text of the 11th century. What's significant is that when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, unlike the uniformity we have in the Masoretic text, what were found were multiple versions of various texts in the Hebrew Bible. So this created kind of a problem for scholars because with the Masoretic text, we have one uniform version, and yet with the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have multiple versions. So there are questions about how it was that during the 3rd century, we have various versions of the Hebrew text of the Hebrew Bible, and by the 11th century, we just have one. So this scroll gives us our first piece of hard evidence that at the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls, around the 2nd and 6th century, it was the Masoretic text that was being used in synagogues for worship, at least in the case of Engedi, but that leads researchers to suspect that the Masoretic text was the one that was the primary authoritative text, the primary one that was being used in the synagogues at the time. This discovery isn't just a breakthrough in our understanding of the biblical text and its development and translation and preservation, but it's also the mark of a new era in archaeology. Research that was previously unimaginable just a generation ago is now possible because of these technologies, being able to take a scroll so destroyed and yet be able to unwrap it and translate it. It's just incredible. A few of the resources I found helpful as I was preparing for this, an article by Youssef Fortath from 2021, just an overview of the synagogue and what was discovered. There's the second article here. This one was in a scientific journal. This was published by the computer scientists that developed the program on how they were able to develop and create this program and digitally unwrap the scroll. Interesting to hear about the scroll from a scientific perspective, as well as a theological and historical perspective. Biblical Archaeology Review has an article as well. This one's just on the Gedi site as a whole, so kind of an overview of Gedi from 3500-ish BCE to the discovery of this synagogue from the 6th century. And then lastly, there's another article put up by the Israel Antiques Authority on this scroll, the significance of the scroll, the history of the scroll, and the translation of it.